Hello and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, a Turkish court refuses to let go of a controversial lawsuit. Thousands of Israeli and Palestinian women march for peace, and we get an inside look at how the MACCABI Tel Aviv basketball team is preparing for the EuroLeague. I'm Natasha Kirchak here with the latest news in Israel. News that Israeli forces prevented an Islamic Jihad terror attack last month has just been released for publication. All of the Arab suspects involved in the plot have been arrested. Israel's Shin Bet security agency just announced details about the thwarted attack. They say a senior Islamic Jihad official in Gaza recruited another Palestinian resident to slip into the Jewish state on the pretext of doing business, but instead carry out an attack at a wedding hall in the south. Another one of the terror cell's operatives was already working at the venue, and a plan was devised to cause as many Jewish casualties as possible. The terrorists were also ordered to abduct and kill an Israeli soldier. The victims' belongings were to be sent to Gaza for use in negotiating a prisoner swap with Israel. Fortunately, the Shin Bet foiled the entire conspiracy and arrested the 4 Arabs involved. 2 of them, including the wedding hall worker, were living in Israel illegally. A third gained residency by marrying an Arab Israeli. Security officials say this grave incident demonstrates how terrorists take advantage of entry permits granted by Israel for humanitarian purposes to help Gaza's economy. They're also warning that it further demonstrates that efforts by Gaza terrorists to carry out murderous attacks in Israel are relentless. Israel and Turkey recently came to an agreement to repair ties that were fractured over the Mavi Marmara affair 6 years ago. But it looks like not everyone in Turkey is happy about the diplomatic breakthrough. A demonstration was held outside of a high court hearing in Istanbul yesterday to protest against an aspect of the deal that requires Turkey to drop any further lawsuits against Israel. But the justices refused to dismiss the case against 4 Israeli generals and delayed proceedings to December, brought on by hundreds of plaintiffs who claim they were wounded, assaulted, or imprisoned during the 2010 raid.
We are strongly supporting the case here in Turkey, and our very firm plea to the court has been that they must continue with the case, that the so-called agreement between Israel and Turkey is not a treaty that is enforceable. It is unlawful under international law, under the European Convention on Human Rights, and under Turkish law, and that the criminal case against those who are accused must continue at all costs.
Israel has already apologized for the deaths of 10 Turks aboard the ship and to pay their families $20 million in compensation. The activists were killed after they attacked Israeli commandos trying to prevent their attempts to breach the naval blockade on Gaza. The dozens of anti-Israel protesters gathered outside of the courthouse waving Palestinian flags while chanting Allahu Akbar, or God is great, in Arabic, and holding signs praising the Mavi Marmara as an honor of humanity.
I can tell you that Palestinians in Palestine are watching this case, because if the Turkish judicial system won't hold Israel responsible for Turkish lives, then what possibility is there for anyone being held accountable for Palestinian lives?
Israel imposed a blockade on Gaza to keep weapons from being shipped to the Hamas terror organization after it seized control of the Strip in 2007. All humanitarian aid for the enclave must be sent to Israeli ports and is delivered after undergoing inspection. The blockade remains in place despite Turkey's demand it be lifted as part of the deal to restore ties with Israel. Last night, the American presidential candidates went head-to-head in their third and last debate, even though Israel wasn't mentioned even once the 2 rival candidates did spar over several issues of critical importance to the Jewish state. Republican nominee Donald Trump took fierce aim at the 2015 Iranian nuclear accord that was so adamantly opposed by the Israeli government. He claimed the deal would absolutely enable Tehran to get the atomic bomb, which would pose a significant threat to Jerusalem. While Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton didn't address the issue last night, she defended the pact during both previous debates, insisting it's been successful in preventing Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. The contenders also briefly discussed Iraq and the civil war raging in Syria just over Israel's northern border. The former reality TV host repeated that his most important regional objective would be combating the Islamic State. Former Secretary of State Clinton also stressed greater U.S. involvement against ISIS, saying she would make it a top priority to go after its leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, just like the administration she served took down terrorist Osama bin Laden. The moderator asked no questions about the Israeli-Palestinian peace talks or the recent friction over Jerusalem's status, nor did either of the candidates. With the growing wave of recent terror attacks both here in Israel and abroad, it can be hard to find hope. Thankfully for us all, though, there are many brave men and women like today's guest who are still fighting the good fight. IDF Major General Uzi Dayan is a former head of Israel's National Security Council, former National Security Advisor to the Israeli Prime Ministers Barak and Sharon, and remains a leading strategist in Israel's defense establishment. He joins us today to talk about what is and can be done in the war against terror. Thanks so much for coming in.
Shalom, Natasha.
So to begin, there are a lot of different issues that Israel is facing, and Hamas in the Gaza Strip is one of the major threats. Just yesterday, Hamas threatened to surprise Israel during any future prisoner exchanges. What kind of surprise do you think Hamas is speaking about, and are they bluffing? Should we truly be concerned over here?
I think they are bluffing, but at the same time, terrorism can take you many places, and we are pretty vulnerable, as you said. I think I have to say from the beginning, you talked about waves of terrorism. It's not waves, it's actually battles. We are in a war of terrorism. There is a regional war in the Middle East. More than 500,000 people were already murdered. More than 7 million refugees only in this region. So it is a war. And one of the main factors of this war is terrorism, or in other words, if you don't fight terrorism effectively, you are not going to win this war. And Hamas is one of the enemies still in Gaza. Terrorism is not an existential threat, but it's a strategic one, which means if you don't fight terrorism effectively, you leave the key to any progress in the hands of some terrorism.
So speaking of fighting, this threat effectively, what can you tell us about the new security barrier, the wall that's being built both underground and above ground along the Gaza Strip border?
It is important, but it's not that important. People are exaggerating the role of this underground war. Israel is much stronger than the Hamas. It's more like Israel have to make a decision here. So far, we are fighting the Hamas, but this is unfinished business. If we want to end it, we have to go on the head of the snake, which means the leadership of the Hamas. Countries like Israel can beat terrorism, and the way to do it is to threat their existence, which means the territory or their leadership. And I think that it will arrive to this position, to this moment, that Israel will have to fight the Hamas and beat the Hamas by eliminating the leadership of the Hamas.
What role can international parties play in that fight, if at all? Or should there be no international involvement in Israel's fight against terror that's, within the borders?
We don't ask other countries to be involved in Gaza, for example, but it's true about the regional war. We want other countries, and we expect other countries to fight terrorism. But if you fight terrorism, it's not enough to fight one sort or one kind of terrorism. Let's take ISIS, for example. We'll deal with the Hamas. What we say to other countries, especially to the Europeans, if you don't help on doing that, and they can help economically, legally, but if you don't help, at least let us do the job. When we talk about the regional war, it's not enough, for example, to fight ISIS. Because if you fight ISIS effectively, and I don't see that it's really done those days, but if you fight ISIS effectively and fight only ISIS, you play to the hands of whom? Of Bashar al-Assad, the Russians, and Iran. So once you fight terrorism, and you have to fight terrorism, you have to fight all kind of sort of terrorism.
And, you know, speaking of that, one of the main issues that we've been seeing happening here in Israel, especially in the past couple of weeks, is young Palestinians, teenagers who are throwing rocks, bottles, getting involved in violence using social media to help carry out attacks. How should Israel be confronting this issue?
First of all, by fighting back, as I said, you have to recognize, first of all, that we are talking about a war on terrorism. It's not like the old wars, the classic wars, but this is a war. And the way to win such a war is by combining 5 different efforts. The political one, for example, we want the Palestinian Authority to take side here and to help, especially against incitement, etc. A military one, as we can see. And then there is a legal effort and economical effort, going after the money. And finally, also the everything to do with the media, especially on those young people, is why they do it? They do it because they are supported by their neighborhood. So I was talking about a legal effort, for example, is also to punish their family. Only by combining these 5 efforts into a fist and use it for a long time, we can win terrorism. And what are we doing actually? It's continue to build our Jewish democratic state. So terrorism in the long run does not win. It can hurt sometimes badly, but if you take, for example, we are talking English or American audience, if you think about 9/11, it was a very painful blow. But where Osama bin Laden and all this organization, Al-Qaeda, etc., is here, and where is the United States?
Now, this resolution with UNESCO that just came out, essentially ignoring and denying Jewish ties to the holiest sites in Jerusalem, what kind of impact do you think that that's going to have on the Palestinian people who, you know, are fighting for what they believe is the right peace?
I don't think it will have a huge impact. We feel very strongly about it, but I mean to say it's more stupidity and ignorance than a powerful a weapon. And the answer is today there is a march in Jerusalem with tens, dozens of hundreds of thousands of people are there, and we continue to build Jerusalem. And this is the right answer to just rubbish issues like, you know, Jerusalem is not mentioned in the Quran even once. So we don't say that there is not a place to all religions in Jerusalem, but say that Jerusalem is not, I don't know, belongs to the Palestinians more to the Jewish people. Is like saying that Moses actually, his name was Musa, etc.
Right. Well, thank you so much for coming in and giving us your standpoint on how we should be combating terror here in Israel and abroad.
Thank you very much.
Thousands of women have been marching across Israel for the past 2 weeks in the name of peace. And last night, they finally ended their journey in a mass gathering outside of the Prime Minister's residence in Jerusalem. The March of Hope kicked off from the Rosh Hanikra border crossing between Israel and Lebanon in the north. The enthusiastic women held a number of rallies to raise awareness of their mission for regional peace, as they made their journey on foot through the hills and valleys of Judea and Samaria.
هدفنا لما نيجي من الشمال احنا لحد هنا ونمشي اليوم بس للقدس ونحقق هذا الهدف اللي احنا جايين عشانه. Coming here to make a peace with all the neighbors here, Jordan, Palestine, Israel, to live together in peace.
Women from other countries also took part in the events, which included a lot of singing, prayers, and even the holding of a mass on the banks of the Jordan River.
أنا أول مرة بشارك في هذا البرنامج، هو نساء من كل العالم جايين لأجل السلام. طبعا التقينا مع ناس من الداخل، ناس من كندا أعتقد، في ناس من دول برا، وهم كل هدفهم يجوا على نقطة العبور ويأكدوا فكرة السلام، إنه إحنا شعوب بدنا السلام.
Many of the participants carried signs expressing their desire to work together hand in hand toward changing reality and building a new future. Once they reached their final destination last night, the scores of joyous women danced and sang their songs of peace outside the premier's official residence in Jerusalem.
What is happening here tonight is that women say enough of the strife, of the war, of the hatred, of the separation between people, between women, we're not giving our kids to any political maneuvers anymore.
The event was organized by the grassroots movement called Women Wage Peace. The 37th annual Feast of Tabernacles celebration is underway in Jerusalem. The event has drawn over 5,000 Christians from over 90 countries to Israel this year. And ILTV's Steve Leibowitz spoke to the executive director of the International Christian Embassy to find out more about this major gathering.
It is different in many ways because what we see very strongly is a shift from the northern country towards the global south. We have a decrease in pilgrims coming for countries, for example, from North America and Europe, but we see a strong increase from countries from China, from Latin America, Africa. And one of the most exciting areas today is to see the development from African countries. We have a big delegation from Ivory Coast. The government of Ivory Coast even finances like a pilgrimage for some of their members of parliament, but also for Christian leaders to come and celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles here.
So how many people do you actually have attending that will be taking part in the march and in this festival?
Well, if you will be waiting until the end of the week, people who participate in the march and who come to our events, there will be more than 6,000 Christians from all over the world participating. We had here in the Pace Arena, the opening night, 3,500, another delegation in Engedi with another 3,500. So it is a big feast. It's every year the largest annual tourist event here in Israel.
In addition to the embassy here in Jerusalem, you also have other smaller delegations in other countries around the world. Is that right?
It's not delegations, it's offices of our of the Christian Embassy, and we have branches in more than 80 countries around the world. And they are supporting Israel, they're fighting anti-Semitism in the countries where they are living. And of course they support Israel, different projects, Aliyah, helping Holocaust survivors, but also bringing tourism to Israel.
And specifically about Aliyah, I understand that there's been a very major donation regarding the Aliyah from Ethiopia.
Yes, our global community is very excited about the fact that, like the biblical prophets foretold, that the people of Israel come back from the north, the east, the west, and the south, and they see in the return of the Jews from Ethiopia the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. So they say, we want to be part of what God is doing, we want to support that. So we saw an outbreak of support over this last couple of weeks when we communicated the Ethiopian Aliyah project. We could already a few weeks ago hand over $500,000 to the Keren Hayesod office, and also during this week of the Feast of Tabernacles, I believe we will do another 1 million shekel donation to Keren Hayesod.
When you hear about something like the UNESCO amendment in the United Nations, How is that received within the Christian community, and especially those that come here to Israel?
It is a very sad situation, because what is happening at UNESCO today is that this is supposed to be an international body representing the interests and the will of the global family of the nations around the world. And what actually is happening, that this international body is hijacked by an Islamic agenda, where all the holy sites here in this land, which may be holy to the Muslim communities around the world, they are also holy to Christians around the world, but most importantly, they are the most holy sites of the Jewish people. And in a way, what is taking place here with a, you can say, a kosher stamp from the biggest international body in the world, is that there are a rewriting of history is taking place, where ancient Jewish sites now are suddenly only named by the Islamic names. Rachel's tomb, for example, is referred to as a mosque which doesn't even exist. And the sad thing is that the United Nations is giving approval to such a atrocity against cultural heritages, and it affects us Christians and even more the Jewish people.
The Israeli basketball team Maccabi Tel Aviv has a long tradition of being perennial champions here in Israel. But will that be the case this year in the EuroLeague? In recent years, the team has been slipping up both in Israel and abroad, so I headed over to their stadium to find out how they're preparing for a return to the top four. Today marks a major day for Israeli basketball fans around the country, because Maccabi Tel Aviv will be playing their first home game in the EuroLeagues right here in Tel Aviv. After months of waiting, the EuroLeague home opener will finally provide Maccabi Tel Aviv fans with the chance to get a first-hand impression of how the team will look in the coming season. As we speak, Maccabi is taking the court in a showdown with Spain's powerhouse team, Real Madrid, which is considered one of the strongest teams in the league.
A legendary team like Real Madrid came here, big rival, nice, good relationship between the club, big time game. We need to play great, both ends of the floor, and we want to win the game.
After 2 months of preparation for the season, and we all wait for this game, the first home game, in front of our amazing crowd, fans. I hope we will start on the right leg, and to win this game.
Maccabi is coming off of an unprecedented failure in European basketball's Premier Club competition last season, after missing out on getting qualified in the top 16 for the first time in its history. Despite the failure, fans are more confident than ever that the team will go far in the EuroLeague, since Maccabi has brought together 3 top international basketball stars: Sami Weems, Andrew Goodluck, and Devin Smith. The American-born star performers will be playing together for the first time this season, and even though they need time to gel, they're still looking forward to their newest season with Maccabi Tel Aviv.
We're all super close. We all joke around together. If anybody has anything to say to anybody, we're free to say it. And, I think that translates on the court, because we hold each other, when we're starting to hold each other accountable, and we figure things out together.
This program has a great culture. This basketball team has great culture. Our front office has a great coach, and the city has a great coach. And I just want to add a championship to that.
When I came here, they told me, nothing less than a championship is good. So for us to get there, for us to get to the Final Four, those things are okay, but I don't think it'll be a truly success unless we win.
Maccabi Tel Aviv has a long history as the most successful basketball team in Israel, helping to establish the Jewish state as a basketball powerhouse in 1977, when the team won its first European championship.
Everybody tells me about the tradition, about the history of the club, and the pride that comes along with wearing the Maccabi jerseys.
Maccabi Tel Aviv has already won 3 European championships in the past, and now the team has yet another chance to prove their talent by returning to the top 4. But for some of the team's American transplants, winning would only be a small part of their passion for Israel and the team.
Any American players want to come to Europe or the Middle East to play basketball, Tel Aviv is the city, the #1 city.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. The Jewish holiday of Sukkot is now halfway through, and for those who don't know, it signifies the ending of the fall harvest. So today's word is stav, which means autumn in Hebrew. The beginning of this stav season is welcomed in lots of different ways all over the world. What is today's Halloween used to be related to Samhain, the pagan harvest festival, and in no time at all, Thanksgiving and all the beautiful stav colors that come with it will arrive as well. Between Sukkot here in Israel, the Mid-Autumn Pagan Harvest Festival, the Persian Meregan Festival in Iran, and the many other celebrations found all over the globe, there is no shortage of ways to welcome in the stav. So no matter how you prefer to party, we wish you a bountiful and beautiful stav. On that note, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast.
ILTV's weather forecast is sponsored by Adopt a Savta, taking care of Israel's lonely Holocaust survivors.
The weekend is finally here with lots of sunshine. Tomorrow should have fairly clear skies with a high in the mid-80s, and Saturday will be sunny with a slight drop in temperature. All right, everybody, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.84 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to check out our next update at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for watching, and see you tonight.